Good evening, students. We are going to discuss fundamental duties, a very important part of our course. Basically, in this session, I'm going to discuss about what are fundamental duties, why are they important, why were they not added in the Constitution when it commenced, why were they added later, how many amendments, what are the committees related to fundamental duties, and most importantly, the list of fundamental duties. Now, as I defined DPSP, let's also define fundamental duties. How do we define? Remember, fundamental is basic. Okay. Duty is an obligation. What is expected out of you? Obligation. Now, coming to what type of obligations, they are basically moral and civic obligations, moral obligations that which tell you how you should behave. For example, respect women, give up on violence. Civic, that which is expected out of you because you are a citizen of this country. So, moral and civic obligations, fundamental duties are moral and civic obligations that the Constitution imposes. Okay. Now, the question is on whom? According to the Constitution of citizens, it shall be the duty of every citizen. So we say citizens. Okay, so the Constitution gives lists out certain moral and civic obligations for the citizens. Now the question is why these moral and civic obligations? To ensure unity and integrity in the country. The primary purpose is to remain to keep the country united, to ensure that the country's unity is preserved. Now, why were fundamental rights not added when the constitution commenced, and why were they later included? Was it that there was no debate on adding fundamental rights, no discussion on fundamental rights during the Constituent Assembly debates? The answer is no. There was a discussion, but fundamental duties were not added when the Constitution commenced because, see, you look at the entire course of national freedom struggle. The citizens of this country have conducted beautifully in the national freedom struggle. I mean to say that they played an active role. They were very selfless. They kept the country before them. India is a country. India is a society where there is a lot of division in the society. Your contribution and participation in the society, political, social activities depended on your birth. That despite this kind of stratification, despite this kind of division that was carried for centuries together, in the national freedom struggle, everybody came together. They worked shoulder to shoulder. They gave the country priority over their personal life, and they fought for the freedom. This shows that the citizens of this country were duty bound, and it is an insult to remind a person who is duty bound about his responsibilities. That is the reason fundamental duties were not added. However, when you look at the restrictions placed on fundamental rights, majority of these restrictions indirectly act as obligations on citizens. For example, when you look at freedom of speech and expression, there is one restriction which says no defamation. Okay, there is one restriction which says should not disturb public order. So, you are obliged to, you have a duty to ensure that you do not defame anybody in the name of freedom of speech and expression. This was why it was not added. However, it was added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. A new Part 4A was inserted with Article 51A, and it was added. Now, why was it added? It was added in 1976. Usually, when I ask this question in the physical class, offline class, they say, ma'am, because we had emergency. But do you really think it was just emergency? Let's look at the scenario in the country in 1976, irrespective of who is responsible. Whether it is the government, whether it is the emergency, the fact remains that by 1976, there were a lot of sectarian tendencies in India. There were movements for separate, secessionist movements for separate country, like the Khalistan, the Dravidanadu movement. We had separatist movements. There were huge demands for separate states. There were instances of very large scale communal violences, caste based violences. So sectarian tendencies increased in India. Sectarian tendencies were threatening the unity and integrity of the country. In another way, if I have to put it, during the freedom struggle, citizens put the nation before their personal life. But in after the independence, and by the time we came to 1976, citizens gave importance to their individual identities over their country, and this was threatening the unity and integrity of India. That was the reason why the fundamental duties were added, because the government felt that it was about time that citizens were reminded of their duties. So this was the reason why it was added. Now moving forward, let's look at the committees related to fundamental duties. There are two important committees. The first committee is Sardar Swaran Singh Committee. Sardar Swaran Singh Committee is not just related to the fundamental duties, it actually recommended the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which means that this committee also recommended inclusion of fundamental duties in the Constitution. So, question: on the basis of which committee's recommendation fundamental duties were inserted? Sardar Swaran Singh Committee. However, not all recommendations were accepted. For example, Swaran Singh Committee said duty to pay taxes should be included. Fundamental duty should be made justiciable. Both of them were not accepted. Then we had the Verma Committee. Verma Committee was constituted in 1990s basically because in 1976 it was added to the constitution, but duties were not followed. Not many people followed them, and they were non-justiciable. So the Verma Committee was appointed by the Human Resource Department, Ministry of Human Resource and Development, basically to recommend on how to popularize fundamental duties. And Verma Committee's contribution towards fundamental duties is very significant. You know why? Because Verma Committee identified a few characteristics of fundamental duties. Like Verma Committee said, it represented Indian way of life. Many of the fundamental duties actually were a image of Indian way of life. What do I mean by this? For example, we Indians worship nature. Do we worship nature? Yes. Most of the Hindu gods are semi-animal, semi-human form. We worship trees, we worship animals, so we worship nature. Okay. And there is a duty which says protect environment. There is a ancient saying which goes where women are worshipped, gods reside. So respecting women, honoring women was part of our culture. India promoted universal peace. We had ancient hymns like Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, the Shanti Mantra. Then we always talked about compassion to living creatures. Most importantly, we spoke about giving up on violence, ahimsa paramo dharmaha. So, Indian way of life was reflected in fundamental duties. The second point that they spoke about is they said even though fundamental duties are non-justiciable, they are non-justiciable. However, they are certain laws which indirectly give effect to fundamental duties. How? For example, you have a duty which says you should respect the national flag, the national anthem, and the constitution. You go burn the constitution on the road. Will they arrest you or not? They will arrest you. They will not arrest you for violating your fundamental duties. They will arrest you because there is a law called Prevention of Insults to the National Honors Act, under which, if you are disrespectful towards the national flag, the national anthem, or the Constitution of India, you will be arrested and you can get an imprisonment up to 3 years. So there are some laws which indirectly give effect to fundamental duties. So Burma Committee basically said this and it gave some recommendations. It said include it in the ensure that you include them in the curriculum of the school. That's the reason in the school textbooks, in the inner side of the cover, you find the fundamental duties listed. So it basically said that you don't have to put in a lot of effort for to make people follow them. You just need to create awareness because all this is part of our way of life. Okay, so these were the committees that were appointed that are related to fundamental duties. Now, moving forward, why are fundamental duties significant? What is the significance of fundamental duties? First significance is, please remember, they correlate, they complement and supplement fundamental rights and DPSPs. I'll explain this when I come to it. Second, they're very important because they drive a moral and civic sense in people. Third, they reflect Indian way of life. They are very, very important for the unity and integrity because they are universally equally applicable to all citizens of India. Unity and integrity of India. They are very, very important for building unity and integrity of India. They treat all citizens equally. And remember, they are applicable not just to the citizens, but according to the Supreme Court, they are also applicable to the state. For example, you have a duty which says protect environment. Who is in a better position to protect or damage environment? Do you think a government through its policy or a citizen? Undoubtedly, it is government. One policy from the government can help the one policy from the government can help the country, can help in protecting the environment, can do a lot of damage to the environment. So there are certain duties that should be followed by the state as well. Moving forward, the next thing that we have to know is about the amendments to fundamental duties. Please remember there were two amendments. 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act inserted 10 fundamental duties in the Constitution, whereas the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act amended fundamental duties to include the 11th fundamental duty. So, this is about the two amendments. Now, moving forward, let's look at the list of fundamental duties. To abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem. I gave you Prevention of Insults to the National Honors Act as an example for this. To cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired a national struggle for freedom, to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. And in your exam, in MCQs, they'll ask you, where all do you find the words sovereignty, unity, and integrity in the Constitution? Preamble, fundamental duties. In fundamental rights, you have sovereignty and integrity. You don't have the word unity mentioned. To define the country and render national service when called upon to do so, to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, regional, or sectional diversities. Please remember, common brotherhood, Vasudaika Kutumbam, is the basis for it. To renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women, where women are worshipped, gods reside. To value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture, to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife. This actually correlates with directive principles of state policy. With reference to this fundamental duty only, they have actually said, with reference to this fundamental duty only, Supreme Court gave the judgment. To develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. India is a very superstitious society. That is the reason why they have included this, because they wanted to develop rationalism, the spirit of questioning anything that is thrown onto you, not blindly accepting. To safeguard public property, basically to safeguard public property and to abjure violence is based out on the ancient belief ahimsa paramo dharma, to strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity so that the nation constantly rises to the higher levels of endeavor and achievement. Till here, it was the 42nd Amendment. 86th Amendment added one more duty. Every parent or guardian should send their child between the age of 6 to 14 years to schools. So these are the fundamental duties as listed in the Constitution. So with this, we finish this small session on fundamental duties. Fundamental duties, it is a very small topic. Usually, most of the times, the questions are asked on the list of fundamental duties. So ensure that you by heart this list. With this, we complete today's session. I'll see you tomorrow with another session.